So this is part 2 in the Prepare Us a Table Before Me, a takeoff of Psalm 23, looking at wild harvest edibles, plants that are ready and waiting for us to use them from the natural world. So just a reminder that it's important that if you are looking at bettering your health, that you partner with a healthcare provider that has a similar philosophy of healing as you do. And anything that we learn tonight is for educational purposes and is not medical advice, but should be checked out thoroughly before jumping in whole hog. And the doctor of the future, according to Thomas Edison, says we'll give no medicine, but will instruct us patient in the care of the human frame, in diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease. It's a very timely quote and reminder each week. So this week, our key focus plant is going to be the dandelion, Taraxacum officinale. There are numerous species of dandelions all across the world. I think there's only a couple places where dandelions don't grow. The beautiful thing about dandelion is that you can eat the entire plant, the roots, the stems, the leaves, the flowers. The only thing that is not eaten are the seeds themselves, not because they're not edible, I don't believe, but just because they are difficult to utilize with their puffy heads. As far as edibility goes, the young leaves are best in the fact that they are the least bitter of the plant leaves, the structures. They become more bitter as the plant gets older and ages. And you can eat those cooked or raw. And the older, more bitter leaves will lose their bitterness when cooked. So cooking actually aids their palatability. The dandelion root can be roasted as a coffee substitute. It is somewhat bitter. It can be cooked and eaten. It has kind of like a turnip-like taste to it. So you can eat it cooked, or you can eat it ground and powdered and then reconstituted. And there are other ways to use it as well. The flower, actually the flower itself, if you take away the bracts, which are the small little green parts underneath the base of the flower, those are where the bitter portion are. The petals themselves are said to be fairly sweet. So they make a nice salad garnish. The buds themselves can be used in salads. So the fresh buds, if you go down to the crown of the dandelion, right down here where my pointer is, you'll see the emerging buds coming up, and there you can use those for salads, or you can pickle them. Some use them like capers. You can also make a tea from the roots and the leaves. It's a pleasant tea, but it has kind of a bitter taste to it. So the tea is also very soothing and beneficial, and we'll see some of the other therapeutic benefits of dandelion as we go along this evening. So dandelion is found everywhere right now. Their yellow blossoms are studding the fields and yards all around us. When you eat them, you want to make sure that the ones that you are collecting for food are not in a place where they have been fertilized or sprayed, like in a yard that's been manicured in that kind of a sense. The more wild they are, the better. They're not going to have the residues on them from toxic byproducts of fertilizers or herbicides. You don't want to have those entering into your system. The flowers can also be boiled and salted, so just eating the flowers in a kind of a flour boil, but they make a sharp contrasting garnish to many different dishes. So some nutritional highlights. This is from 1 cup of chopped dandelion. Vitamin A has 5589 international units, which is pretty high for vitamin A. That's also known as beta carotene. So it's a very rich source of vitamin A. Sodium, a fairly decent amount of sodium as well, 42 milligrams per 1 cup of chopped dandelion greens. Potassium has a whopping 218 milligrams for 1 cup, and 103 milligrams of calcium. So it is a good source of calcium, potassium, and sodium. Folate, 15 milligrams. Vitamin K, 428 micrograms. So that's a smaller subunit in the milligrams, but still a fairly good quantity, which is found in all leafy greens, but a more elevated level here in dandelion. So there's a nice little green smoothie there up on the upper right. Looks like would taste pretty good. One way to mask the taste of the bitterness is to mix it with fruit. They've used some pear and some pineapple to make a rather, I'm sure, a tasty drink smoothie. Just process it in a food processor with nuts, seeds, or oil. That can also tone down the bitterness. And then, of course, choosing the more young leaves that have less bitter taste associated with them. So there's about 250 known species all across the world, and they're all edible. So it's a friend that you can find in many places. I find myself now, wherever I go, just looking at the plants, and where I am, just being situationally aware and knowing what is around. And I think I mentioned this the other week that I found that very beneficial. I was working with my bees. Actually, I wasn't even working with my bees. I'd just driven by my bees, and I'd gotten a sting. One was festering and just buzzing and bothering me around my ear, and it nabbed me right in the ear. And my first thought was plantain. So plantain is a buckhorn plantain or broadleaf plantain. I knew it was spring, should be some around, and I did find some in my garden. But I had kept a clump of it and kind of cared for it, allowed it to grow and not weed it out, because I knew of its medicinal properties. Made a poultice of that and punched it in my ear, and within a short period of time, it knocked it down to a tolerable level and took the pain away. So from a food standpoint, as well as a medicinal standpoint, it's just good to be situationally aware constantly of the plants that are around you. So a recipe, dandy smoothie. So 1/2 to 1 cup of fresh dandelion greens, 1 large mango, pit it and peel it and chop it, and 1 to 2 ripe bananas peeled. 1/2 cup of water, blend all those ingredients in a blender until smooth. And that'll serve one person, 1 serving. So dandy smoothie. Also, you can do a pesto from dandelions, sun-dried tomato and dandelion pesto. So 1 bunch of freshly harvested dandelion, 1 cup of pine nuts, 1/2 cup of sun-dried tomato. You can rehydrate those in water prior to using them. 4 to 5 cloves of garlic, 2 tablespoons of olive oil. That's optional if you're going oil-free, which I would recommend. And 2 tablespoons of lemon juice and 1 teaspoon of sea salt. The regular recipe just says salt, but I always lean on the side of sea salt because you have a wider spectrum of minerals that are physiologically a part of our body, as opposed to being just sodium and chloride, and other fillers that can sometimes be added as flow agents and whatnot. Even sugar is added to some salts to make them less cakey and flow better. And we don't need those additional items in our diet. So then blend all that in the food processor until it's smooth, and then eat it like you would pesto. So put it on crackers or whatever to use that pesto. Then refrigerator freeze the leftovers. So there's lots of different ways that you can use dandelion in your day-to-day use. You can use it in salads, more as a texture or a taste depth provider, rather than just a dandelion salad, because that could be on the bitter side, but adding it into another salad greens to add dimension to it. You can eat it boiled, like spinach, and other ways are useful too. You can use it in just like anything you would use spinach for, you can use it. So the bitterness, the new buds are the least bitter, the young leaves that aren't exposed to much sun. So dandelions that are out in the lawn growing in full sun will have much more bitter flavor than those that are growing in a shady area. They tend to become more bitter as they go along. They can be harvested almost year round. They do kind of taper off towards the winter, but they are still present. Boiling again the greens will cut the bitterness back, and as you boil them, if you like 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, check it and find the bitterness level that suits you. The more you boil it, the more nutrients may be stripped away from them. Lightly boiled is going to retain more nutrients, but have a higher bitterness content. But everybody has a different palate and a tolerance for bitterness. So if you check it and find the amount that's best for you. And it also may depend on the batch you have too, because you maybe get a batch that's out in the sun more rather than in the shade. So there's going to be a different astringency or bitterness associated with different batches that are harvested. So again, the flower petals are sweet when they're separated away from the green bracts. So medicinal uses. I always like to include medicinal uses because it just kind of goes hand in hand with edibility. It's hard to separate those, so we'll talk some about that too. The roots are excellent for gastrointestinal issues and liver problems. The leaves have diuretic effects. It actually functions as a tonic for the entire body. So a tonic is something that benefits the body in a slow, gradual, but powerful way, as opposed to being a rapid physiological change, which we see associated with typical pharmacological drug application. So very high in vitamins and minerals and antioxidants. So the roots themselves aid digestion. They help the kidney and gallbladder and the liver. So basically the one way that they work is they stimulate bile production. And one way that can aid digestion, especially if people are consuming a high fat diet, that can be beneficial because the bile is what breaks down fats and emulsifies fats. If you're not eating a high fat diet, which is a better way to go, a non or a low fat diet, then that particular aspect won't be as much benefit as to someone who would be eating a high fat diet. It also helps digestion in that it aids toxin removal, and it does that in a variety of ways. We'll see this over and over again, that its diuretic effects allows the more rapid transit of toxins out of the body. It helps in people with situations of jaundice. It can actually elevate a person's energy levels post-infection. So after you've had an infection, sometimes it just wipes you out. Your energy levels are just really low, and this can help to put some pep back in your step. It's not a stimulant per se, but it can aid those energy levels. Also, it can restore and aid in electrolyte balance restructuring, primarily because of the replacement of sodium and potassium. Sodium and potassium are constantly lost through the urine. Potassium is always lost. Sodium, if it becomes necessary to retain it, your body will and can shut off all release of sodium. But potassium is constantly lost. So having that returned to the body is a good thing to have available. So there's a 2-week liver cleanse that one of the authors that I used suggested, a homemade liver tonic, a blend of dandelion root and milk thistle seed tinctures. So making a tincture, you can do a vegetable glycerin tincture. So using it every 6 months or twice a year for general health purposes. Basically, some of the roles it can play is helping to prevent gallstones. It also contains inulin from the dandelion root. And your body produces inulin too, but you can get additional inulin from outside the body. And inulin is a carbohydrate that aids your gut flora in feeding it and helping it to be healthy, and also aids in blood sugar regulation. Essentially, it helps to level out blood sugar spikes. It helps them not to spike as high or go as low when they do change due to diet. Also, it's a high in fiber and aids bowel movements, which is a good thing to stay regular on that. So being a diuretic, it helps to remove toxins from the body. And if you retain, for example, urine in your bladder for a long period of time, sometimes people will not drink water because they don't want to go to the bathroom. but that creates a more highly toxic environment because the urine is much more concentrated, higher urea and other toxins are present. If you keep a nice dilute urine that is constantly moving through the body, that's going to be much better than having toxic urine. It is more detrimental on the urinary tract as well as the bladder itself. Same is true for the colon. Keeping it in regular, constant transit rather than having constipation occur or infrequent bowel movements. Many people in the Western world have very infrequent bowel movements, once or twice a week, as opposed to once or twice a day. Great effort put forth to have that happen. And that feces is going to be more toxic as it transits through the colon in addition to that. So the liver, it's going to be a protective agent and aid in the healing of the liver. So basically dandelion antioxidants and vitamins protect and maintain liver health. It's actually an excellent way to treat hemorrhaging liver and aids in the removal of toxins. It's actually used to treat non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So fatty liver disease is typically seen along with alcohol consumption, along with cirrhosis of the liver. But non-alcoholic fatty liver disease comes primarily from the use of excessive amounts of high fructose corn syrup and other sugars, excessive sugar consumption, and particularly high fructose corn syrup, because in the body it gets metabolized and turned into alcohol on its way through the metabolic pathways, and as it's detoxified by the body, it stresses the liver. So you can also use that liver cleanse tonic to aid the liver. From above there, the dandelion root and the milk thistle tincture. There was actually a liver transplant candidate who began using that tincture who no longer needed a candidate or a donor after systematic use of the tincture. It also benefits those who have cirrhosis of the liver and or hepatitis. So very beneficial kind of thing to have around, for sure. So detoxification is important and very diuretic, powerful diuretic products. Productivity. The leaves themselves are a very strong diuretic and blood purifier. And again, they stimulate the liver and the gallbladder, the release of bile, and the removal of toxins because of the diuretic effects through the urine. Aids in flushing the kidneys. So not only does it increase the production of urine, your kidneys are the primary instrument of having that happen, and then aids in potassium and sodium replacement. We mentioned that earlier. Unlike coffee and tea and other caffeine-based diuretic effects, those are more based on a chemical molecule that does that, as opposed to it actually replacing needed nutrients in the process. So potassium is lost. Potassium loss is ratio-based, shouldn't be ration-based, ratio-based. So it's a percentage of the total that is constantly lost. But dandelions bring it back in quantity. So that's a beneficial role of dandelions. Even though it is a diuretic, it replaces those things that other types of diuretics do not. Even if you're on a diuretic medication, it's not going to be replacing the missing electrolytes that it's flushing out. So it's helpful for the skin. From a wound perspective, warts and corns, you take the fresh dandelion juice and apply that to a fresh surface wound, and it can aid healing. Basically, it has antifungal and antibacterial effects. So basically, you can take that juice and crush it just in your hand, or you can like juice it in a juicer of some kind, crush it just so you can get that juice extracted. The dandelion milk or the white juice, when you break a leaf off or break the flower stem off, it's going to have that milk. That milk can actually be helpful for itching and to reduce ringworm, eczema, corns, and warts. So just apply that sap directly to the affected skin area and let it dry on. So it can also be an effective acne treatment and prevention, and can help reduce scarring from acne. Also, dandelion leaf tea can be useful as a skin wash and aid healing of skin abrasions and lacerations and that type of thing. So the dandelion leaf tea can be drunk internally as well as used as a wash externally. We saw that same kind of effect with red clover. One thing that should be noted is that dandelions are in the Asteraceae family, same as daisies, and some people are actually allergic to the daisy family. So if you know that you are, then dandelions wouldn't be a plant of choice for you. So if you're using the dandelion milk or anything else, try it on a small area of the body, the skin first, just to check for sensitivity. So it's helpful for bone health and osteoporosis situations because of its high calcium and vitamin K content. So 103 milligrams per cup of calcium and 428.1 micrograms per cup of vitamin K. So basically it has bone protective effects. Remember last time we talked about lamb's quarters, it has 150 milligrams per cup, so it has higher levels of calcium, lamb's quarters does. But both of them compared to spinach per cup, which only has about 50 milligrams of calcium per cup. And then that has oxalates that tend to disrupt its ability to assimilate it. So arthritis, osteoporosis, basically it aids in bone density and stabilization. You can see an osteoporotic hip structure here and kind of an electron microscope view of that on the right. Basically, osteoporosis is bone porosity increase versus a normal bone density. It does have pores through it. In a spongy bone, the dense bone around the outer edges is going to be less spongy or more solid, but in an osteoporotic condition, that can tend to become less intact. Many times people don't realize they even have osteoporosis until they break a hip. So this area here becomes compromised, and the head of the femur can break in an osteoporotic bone, and that can lead to pneumonia and death from recovery. So there is very good recovery from osteoporotic bones and also from hip fractures today, but that was often a step in the wrong direction to have a hip fracture due to osteoporosis. So dandelions can be helpful in arresting that and bringing bone health back into par. It's also helpful for blood sugar control. So the dandelion juice, again, stimulates inulin production by the pancreas. And then remember, the root itself had inulin in it. So you can eat the root and get inulin from the root, but the dandelion juice can stimulate your own pancreatic inulin production. And basically it prevents the roller coaster ride of your blood sugar highs and lows. It really levels out the peaks and valleys of someone with diabetes. It also aids in maintaining lipid control of triglycerides and cholesterol, which is very interesting, and we'll look at this a little bit further too. It's also helpful for urinary tract health. Basically, it inhibits bacterial growth in the urinary tract and can function as a disinfectant. So essentially, it can prevent and aid in eliminating UTI pathogens. Cancer prevention and treatment. So dandelion extract has lots of antioxidants in it. Basically, the reduction of free radicals, oxygen free radicals in particular, can help mitigate cancer risk and reduce those types of issues. Basically, it also helps remove toxins that can be toxic to the DNA and cause cellular structure changes that can lead to cancer situations too. So just helping to shepherd out any toxins through the diuretic effects of dandelion is helpful. A synergistic benefit is seen in dandelion root and burdock root, particularly in the care and prevention of cancer situations. So antioxidants, the most powerful antioxidants known is glutathione, which the body makes itself, but plants are the other primary source of antioxidants. Any sun-ripened fruit, vegetables, phytophactors essentially are the mechanism of providing antioxidants to the body. Green harvest foods don't have that same effect, but you can see an antioxidant here is donating an electron to an unpaired oxygen-free radical. An oxygen-free radical is going to get that from somewhere, and typically in either air changes or pollution or ionizing radiation, those all can end up with cellular damage to the DNA because those oxygen-free radicals are going to be grabbing it from somewhere, and at some point it can have access to the DNA and cause damage. They found that dandelion extract, Chatterley et al. In 2011, that extract inhibits proliferation of human melanoma cells, and they found it effective against breast cancer and prostate cancer cells. Singstead et al. In 2008, and cervical cancer cells were affected by it by Kita, Eddy, and Sudarta. So some positive research behind that as well. Beneficial for anemia and iron deficiency because there is a high level of iron, not excessive, but enough to benefit individuals who have low iron levels, and also helpful in hypertension reduction of high blood pressure. The diuretic effects, the sodium load is reduced, and also reduces cholesterol ratios. Again, not rations, ratios, by benefiting the high density lipoprotein levels. So typically HDLs are only affected by exercise, but in this case, there's actually a dietary factor, the inclusion of dandelion, that can positively affect the HDL levels of cholesterol. And essentially low density lipoprotein cholesterol versus high density lipoprotein, HDL, LDL. LDLs are typically smaller and carry less cholesterol with them than high density. And then the chylomicrons are another carrying molecule for cholesterol, often referred to as triglycerides. It helps boost the immune system by fighting off fungal and microbial challengers, helpful in lactation, is used in traditionally for milk letdown in lactating mothers. Also an anti-inflammatory agent by providing the antioxidants and phytonutrients and essential fatty acids, omega-6 and 3s, that help to decrease overall swelling of tissues. Teraxerol is a dandelion derivative that's present in dandelion roots that is beneficial specifically for osteoarthritis. So if you're allergic to daisies or other members of the aster family, don't use dandelion. Otherwise, it's all its parts, the roots, stems, leaves, flowers, are completely edible. The sap can again cause irritation in some individuals. If you're pregnant or nursing, it would be good to follow up with a healthcare provider to see if there's any contraindications. So dandelion root tea, the recipe here. So 1/2 to 2 cups of roasted dandelion root to 1 cup of boiling water, steep it for 20 minutes, strain and drink. And then you can use that for general medicinal use, 3 cups of that per day. You can also make the same tea out of leaves. Just use a heaping tablespoon of the leaves in a cup of boiling water and steep for 20 minutes and strain and drink. Noticeably, the leaves are going to have different therapeutic qualities than the root because of the different constituents that are present in them. If you're using root capsules, 1 capsule 3 times per day is beneficial if you're using that instead of the drink. So Hippocrates said way long ago that let food be thy medicine, and your medicine be thy food. So you should be using food for medicine. That's really borne out here in the dandelion because we started off talking about it with respect to its wild edibility, and then we fell right into medicinal benefits. But they go hand in hand because it's the food that keeps us well. And if we're eating bad food, then we don't stay well. And that's just the bottom line. First, do no harm is part of the Hippocratic Oath. Hippocrates said, I will prescribe regimens for the good of my patients according to my ability and my judgment, and never do harm to anyone. So always do benefit. And that is something that should be brought back to the forefront in our day and age.